Right, let's get you the latest on Novak Djokovic in Australia. Plenty of details to bring you. The Australian government is still deciding whether to cancel his visa, and new questions are emerging about the player's travel history prior to arriving in Australia. This could be a new issue for him. First of all, though, here's the Serbian Prime Minister, who's been speaking to the BBC's Balkans correspondent Guy Delorney of how she's hopeful Djokovic will be allowed to defend his singles title at the Australian Open.
From what I understand right now, the Ministry of Immigration is basically checking Novak's medical exemption, and the final decision is yet to be brought. So I don't think this is the end of the whole saga, but I'm hoping, and that's what I said to Prime Minister Morrison, I'm hoping that Novak will be allowed to stay in Australia and play in the Australian Open.
Both you and President Vucic have talked about how there is an atmosphere in Australia with elections coming up and questioned whether that's come into play with the decisions that have been made about Novak. Having spoken to Scott Morrison, have you changed any views on that? How do you feel about how he is going to approach the issue?
Well, I have to say that I had a very positive and very constructive conversations with both their Minister of Foreign Affairs, Maurice Payne, whom I spoke to on Saturday morning, and the Prime Minister Morrison, whom I spoke to last night, yesterday evening. So both very positive, very constructive, and I'm very appreciative of that. I'm very thankful for that. Whether it is a political issue within Australia, I don't know, to be honest, but it was important for me and for the Serbian public to say that it has nothing to do with Australian-Serbian relationship.
Well, let's bring in Guy Delorney, who's live with me from Belgrade. Guy, we've been hearing in the last 48 hours about this positive test and then seeing all this evidence that Novak Djokovic wasn't self-isolating. Is that getting attention in Serbia?
Not as much as you perhaps would think, or then again, perhaps exactly as much as you would think. It's not something which is being foregrounded in the Serbian media, let's put it that way. All the way along, the Serbian press has been really partisan about this. So, for example, when we had the court verdict yesterday, the headline was Novak beats Australia. That was one of the headlines and one of the news sources here. So, of course, anything which is going to show their icon in a bad light has been further down the page. But to be fair to the Serbian media, they have also been doing things like printing his negative test results and his positive test results in full on the page for everybody to see, and also talking about this question about whether he knew that he tested positive on the 16th of December when he went out on the 17th of December to present prizes to young tennis players. See, limited coverage, perhaps less prominent, but it has, to be fair to the Serbian media, been there.
And I was interested, listening to your interview, Guy, that this is now a complete intertwining of sport and politics, with Serbia's leader very keen for this not to impact on Serbia's relationship with Australia.
And fair enough, because there's a very large Serbian diaspora in Australia, as you'll have seen by the people dancing outside Novak Djokovic's quarantine hotel, for example. But there's a lot more people than that. There are very strong links between this region and Australia. In fact, until very recently, the Australian football leagues, the soccer leagues, were organised along ethnic grounds, which included the ethnicities from this region. So there are important links. Although Ana Brnabić was saying to me that, you know, they felt sometimes really that they didn't have a stronger relationship with Australia as they would like to, given those links, and perhaps this might be an opportunity, funnily enough, in a crisis to have something good come out of it and strengthen those ties.
Don't go anywhere, guys. Stay with us here on Outside Source. Novak Djokovic is getting ready to play at the Australian Open. Here he is practicing at the Rod Laver Arena earlier. Of course, lots of people are speculating what kind of reaction he might get from the crowd if indeed he plays, and bear in mind it's not certain he will. Here's a sample of some Australians who've been speaking to us.
I just sort of wonder what the reception will be like when he gets here. We're a country of booers, we do like that, but I'm sure he can handle that.
Yeah, we're really excited that he's here. It's cool to have all those top players, and yeah, we are super excited for him.
If he plays, I will not watch him because he's not vaccinated.
People have been through so much over the last 18 months, 2 years. to be the most locked down city in the world, it's completely understandable, in my opinion, that they can be as angry as they are. However, if there's measures being put in place and he's passed those measures by the 2 medical boards that the government have put in, then I think that he's done what he had to do.
Well, Djokovic's former coach Boris Becker says the tennis star may get a rough reception if he does play at the Australian Open.
Well, I'm sure there are going to be a couple of boos and whistles, but again, he's used to that. He was never everybody's darling. He was always a street fighter. He had to fight the odds. He had to win over the crowd. And I thought it was fascinating at the final of the US Open, where they finally embraced him, and he couldn't handle that either. He started crying on the changeovers because he was filled with too many emotions. So again, the crowd will be difficult with him, but with each match he's starting to win, and you know, the crowd will embrace him again. But it's going to be a difficult week. It's going to be a difficult first week.
On top of all of that, questions are now being raised about whether Novak Djokovic made a false declaration on his border entry form when he arrived in Australia. The media there is reporting that he ticked a box to say he had not travelled in the 2 weeks before arriving in Melbourne on the 5th of January. But we know some of the places where he'd been. On Christmas Day, he was in Belgrade. This picture was tweeted by a Portuguese journalist showing him posing with a Serbian handball player. A few days later, he was in Spain. Here he is training in Marbella on the 2nd of January. He also signed autographs for some of the fans there. So, Guy Delaunay, these questions are not going away, particularly with a focus on the last 2 weeks of December.
Indeed. And of course, I asked Prime Minister Ana Brnabić about this, and I asked Novak Djokovic's mum, Diana, about this, because we spoke to her earlier today as well. Both of them said to me they were questions that only Novak himself could answer. In fact, Diana Djokovic said to me, look, he's a grown man. He doesn't tell me everything about his movements or what he's up to. I don't genuinely know what he's been doing, what his movements were. Novak will have to answer those questions for himself. And this is the problem, I think, all the way along here. We're all speculating about what's been going on with Novak Djokovic. We're speculating about what could happen with any possible ministerial intervention in Australia. It would help everybody an awful lot if Novak Djokovic himself came out and was 100% straight about what he'd been doing, timings of tests, when he knew about results, where he'd been going. We could all have a much better picture of this, and I think people would think better of Novak Djokovic for it.
Just finally, Guy, a little bit of context. I think I can guess the answer here, but I'd like to hear it from you. Just how big a star is he in Serbia compared with other public figures?
Well, you know, I asked Ana Brnabić about this. I said, isn't this a bit unusual for the Prime Minister to be getting personally involved in an immigration issue in another country? And she said, well, yes, it is, but this is Novak. They wouldn't do this for anybody else, but Novak is so important for Serbia. He's the greatest ambassador for the country, is what Ana Brnabić said to me. And I think that's a fair reflection.
Guy Delaunay, thank you very much indeed.